first thing is that we understand each other, that we become acquainted. Because this work, the message, has very little value outside of the degree of our understanding of each other. In other words, the whole idea of the infinite way is that our union with God, our oneness, our conscious oneness with God, makes us one with each other, universally speaking. And without that, there is no understanding. There's no understanding of each other. There's no understanding of the message or any message. A spiritual message cannot be intellectually understood. And throughout all history, people have shipwrecked religions because they have reduced it to a human value, to a human mode or means of expression, and left out the most important factor, and that is that a spiritual truth must be spiritually understood, spiritually discerned, and that, if anything, the intellect is a barrier to it, more than a help. At some point of our development, the human mind is, of course, a help. But unless it is given its proper place, it becomes a barrier. Now, the same thing is true when it comes to understanding the meaning of a message. And so what I would like to do, first of all, is bring us together to some point of mutual understanding, and then from that point branch out into the message itself. And then I have an idea that it might be very good a little later if we have a period for questions, so that whatever remains that can be answered will be. Now, of course, I understand that many of you have metaphysical backgrounds of different schools. And so I would like to start with this nature of the background of the infinite way. Because the infinite way is the type message that it is, it can never be organized. It can never have an organization. It can never have a church. It can never have a center. It can never have public centers. It can never be spread through any organized activity. And it's for that reason that many people are able to accept it where they are. By that I mean, once they understand what the principle is, it makes very little difference whether they're in Christian Science or Unity or New Thought. They're able to accept the principle itself. And it is for that reason that a great deal of activity is inside the Christian Science movement and inside the Unity movement. It was only just a year ago this month that I addressed the 23 ministers of Unity in California at their retreat by their invitation. and that all over the United States and now in Europe, Unity ministers and Unity students avail themselves of the writings and whatever of the principle they can gather. Understand this point very clearly, that while the message bears the name the Infinite Way, it has no relationship to a message that belongs to anybody. It has no relationship whatsoever to a message that can be localized, if I can use that term, or made a part of a separate movement from other movements. You can see the point that I'm trying to make if I say this to you. The Infinite Way says that it is an impossibility to demonstrate health or supply or home or companionship. It very definitely takes a stand against the demonstration of anything, any person, any circumstance, or any condition. And it stands on the one and only demonstration of demonstrating the realization of the presence of God. And every call for help is turned into that demonstration. In other words, let us come, students come, patients come, and the idea is, I need supply. And our answer is, I'm sorry, we don't know anything about supply or how you can demonstrate it. It doesn't lie within our function. Our function is to reveal God, to make God a living experience, not words in a book, not statements, but an actual experience such as has been had by Moses and Elijah and Elisha, Jesus, John, Paul, and which is available to anybody on earth. More especially those who are ready to abandon all hope for demonstration. In the same way, in some of the writings you'll find that according to the message of the Infinite Way, any attempt to find peace, whether a peace of mind or peace of soul or peace of body, or to find safety or to find security, can have no place in the message of the Infinite Way. There is no way that, at least in my understanding, that anybody can demonstrate peace or safety or security. I can't, after 24 years of active practice, I can't actually believe that such things are possible. I've witnessed the attempts to demonstrate those things, and I've seen the sad experience that has come to people who persist in believing that in one way or another they can demonstrate safety, security, and peace of mind and all the rest. I have seen this too, that in proportion as people, students, patients, have caught the idea that God is a reality and that God can just as well be known to us as we can be known to each other, that in proportion as they turn their entire effort into the seeking first the kingdom of God, then they found that such things as safety, security, and peace were instantly available. And the reason is this. In all of this universe, there is no such thing as supply, separate and apart from God. There is no such thing as safety or security or peace apart from God. The Bible is so very clear Not that God gives us safety or security, but God is the tower, God is the rock, God is the hiding place. Not God provides it. Not through God we get it. Oh, no, no, no. The Bible is too clear on that. Thy grace is my sufficiency. Not loaves and fishes, not houses, not properties, not investments, not bomb shelters. Oh, no. God itself is that. I've just had a beautiful experience in London in meeting Dr. Elsie Ross, who is the minister of the Divine Science Church in London, and at present is president of the International New Thought Alliance in southern England. And she and her husband were at dinner with me one evening, and they told me their war experience. Their home at that time was in Ealing, right between the two major airfields. And in front of their home was the main railroad track, carrying both passengers and freight. So that every single night of the bombardment, their area was completely covered and completely bombarded. It wasn't like other areas around London that one night this neighborhood got it and another night the other neighborhood. Theirs got it every single night, because of being in between the two major airfields and on the railroad tracks. And in all their neighborhood, they were the only ones who had no bomb shelter and who refused to have a bomb shelter. And in the evening, they retired until the bombardment would begin. Then they'd get up and dress and go out on the street and take part as fire watchers. And not one single night during that bombardment were they in a bomb shelter. Not one single night were they seeking any place of safety or security. They were out on the street, or they were at rest in their beds. And not only they were untouched, but on one particular night, when a stick of 6 bombs was laid, and a stick consists of 6 bombs spaced at intervals of 50 feet apart. The 4th bomb in the stick hit the bomb shelter of their neighbor to the left and wiped out the entire family, blew the whole bomb shelter up, and wiped out the entire family. And 50 feet further on was their home, and nothing happened. And when they went to investigate hours later, they found that Bomb 5 and Bomb 6 had stuck together and landed over on the railroad tracks. Sounds almost like fiction, but there is this couple to verify this. And not only that incident, but the fact that throughout this bombardment, they never felt the need of a bomb shelter or that God had to provide any safety for them. To them, God itself was the bomb shelter. God itself was the high tower or the rock or the safety or the security, and God needed no other avenue. That actually is the basis of what I have seen in my work that brought about the infinite way, that it is a ridiculous thing to expect God to send supply when God itself is the only supply. And there is no other supply. When God appears to us as money or property or home, it's still God. It's still a form. In the beginning, God, and God made all that was made, and God could only have made it of its own being. So whether we name it food, clothing, housing, as long as we have the vision that it is God appearing in infinite form, it sends our whole thought back to keeping thought stayed on God, not on some form of God, not on some manifestation of God, or not on some personal desire of our own, but on God itself. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. We're told over and over and over again, in different ways, that we are not to seek what we shall eat or what we shall drink, or wherewithal we shall be clothed. The Father knoweth that we have need of these things, and it is his good pleasure to give us the kingdom. We then, and he's speaking to the disciples, seek ye the kingdom of God. These things will be... The nations of the world seek after demonstrations. The nations of the world seek after food and clothing and housing. The nations of the world are seeking after supply and safety and security, and they are not finding it. All you would have to do is go to any large public library and ask them for a list of books that have been published in the last 10 years on how to find safety, security, and peace of mind and peace of soul. And how many are going to be written this year and published, and next year, and the year after, and nobody's finding it. Nobody's finding it through those books. The only way these things are found, and they are being found, is by those individuals who have come to see that God is my refuge. God is my fortress. The 91st Psalm makes it very clear that to those that dwell in the secret place of the Most High, none of these evils of the world shall come nigh their dwelling place. So from the Old Testament as well as the New, we know that living in this consciousness of God's presence, we find God's presence made available in the infinite forms and varieties in which God appears. Now, if that is understood as a basis, you can easily see why I say that it can't be organized, why it can't belong to me or to you or to any organization. It is a universal truth that belongs to the children of God, belongs to anyone who will open their consciousness, whether they belong to a church or don't. They don't have to leave any church, and they don't have to join any church. All they have to do is open their consciousness to the fact that God is the high tower, God is the fortress, God is the supply, and then it's available to them wherever they may be. And that cannot be organized. Now, it is in the same way that we follow through this idea of our good appearing in any form. We go back to Moses, to the experience of a cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night, manna falling from the sky, Red Sea opening, water coming from the rocks. And we ask ourselves this question: did those things happen as events out here in time or space, or did they happen as a result of the activity of truth in the consciousness of the man named Moses? And we find that if Moses hadn't been there, it wouldn't have happened. Therefore, the entire experience must have been an activity of truth in the consciousness of that man. We go through the Old Testament and find Elijah finding cakes baked on the stones, raven bringing food, widow sharing. We ask the same question: were those things that happened outside, or were those things that happened as a direct result of a state of consciousness of omnipresence of the individual called Elijah, Elisha, later on Jesus? How could loaves and fishes have been multiplied outside the consciousness of the man Jesus? And if he hadn't had the mind that was in Christ Jesus, how could the multiplication have taken place? How could gold have appeared in a fish's mouth, separate and apart from the activity of truth and the consciousness of the man that we call Jesus? In other words, an activity of truth in individual consciousness is what produces that which appears as form outside. Well, it happened in the Old Testament with Hebrews, and it happened in the New Testament with Christians, And I have traced it back to India, too, where it has happened, and China and Japan. So that, again, it is evident that the development on the part of an individual of what we now call Christ consciousness is the only thing essential for that which we call demonstration. I suppose that every one of you have had the experience that we've had in going to one practitioner and not getting a healing, and going to another practitioner and getting a healing. What is the difference? Any difference in God? Any difference in the Christ? Any difference in the truth? No, 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 no. Those in Christian Science all use the same book. Those in Unity all use the same book. And yet, there's as much difference in the state of healing consciousness in one practitioner as another as there is in any other form of human nature. In other words, the healing consciousness has nothing to do with God, since God is the infinite, perfect consciousness of individual being. But the degree of our awareness of that determines how much of a healer we are, and to what extent healing can take place. It really doesn't matter whether you are using the books of Christian Science for your textbooks, or the books of Unity, or the books of New Thought, because I have seen in my life practitioners from all of those movements and divine science, some of the most wonderful, wonderful healers, and most of the others of no account as healers. And yet all with the same books. And what do we learn from that? That the books have very little to do with it. There's enough truth in all of these books for anybody to develop a healing consciousness. There probably isn't all truth in any of them, but there's enough truth in all of them for anybody to develop a healing consciousness. The question is, to what extent we as individuals develop that consciousness. I have two illustrations in mind. One of our students, whose background was Unity, but who never had any opportunity for studying any of the Unity books except Emily Cady's Lessons in Truth. The particular center that she attended didn't approve too highly of the weeklies and monthly magazines, and so didn't recommend them very much. They had them there if anybody wanted them, but they weren't recommended. But Emily Cady's Lessons in Truth was recommended. And this lady became very, very ill, bedridden. She had help without getting help. And then felt that, well, probably it was up to her to do it. And so she took a hold of Emily Cady's book, and she worked with that book for 2 months. But she worked seriously, diligently, vigorously. And one evening, lying in bed, a beautiful experience came to her. We would call it illumination. And some statement out of that book came to her, in the word that if you believed this book, that error isn't a reality, how could you stay in bed? She said, well, that's true. If I believed it, how could I stay in bed? And she got out of bed and was healed. Well, that was without all of the trimmings and without all of the things that go with it, just by a concentration of one book, and there was enough truth in that one book to do all that was necessary. The other experience I just had in London, when I had occasion to meet a woman who was considered one of the busiest Christian Science practitioners over there, although she's not a member of the church. And she told me her story, that for many years she was bedridden. But all the practitioners gave her up because she wasn't a member of the church, and told her that she couldn't be healed because she wasn't a member of the church. It just seemed that it didn't work that way. And she thought that was a very strange God, one who wouldn't heal you unless you signed membership in some particular church. And so she gave up the use of practitioners and began to work with the books. And she not only had a miraculous healing, but she got a marvelous practice today. And through whatever it was that she gained from those books. Now, it is true that with the exception of some of the really sad and irresponsible books, that the vast majority of books on metaphysics, I mean those that are put out by reputable organizations, all of them have enough truth in them for anybody to develop a healing consciousness in that church, in that movement, or out. So it is. If our object is to attain some measure of that mind that was in Christ Jesus, we are going to find that in whatever approach we have decided on. Now, when we have it, it hasn't been the church or organization that did it. It was our development of that consciousness that did it. And we have a choice then. We can go on and remain with that organization and do our healing work, or if we're called out of it, we may go out and be independent. I have said to our students over and over again, I remained inside the organization for 16 years and never felt any sense of limitation, never felt any sense of anything wrong about being inside the organization. I did my work just as well inside as out, and the chances are I might still be inside if it hadn't been for these books writing themselves, which is against all rules and regulations. And that, of course, forced me to drop membership and be out. But the being in a movement or out of a movement has nothing to do with it, or what movement it is. What has to do with it is this principle of a spiritual consciousness, a consciousness of spiritual awareness, externalizing itself as what we call healing. Now, it is for that reason that the Infinite Way has not been organized and never will be organized, and now the way has been opened so that we can even ensure that it never will be organized, so that whatever is in it that is of any benefit to anyone, they're welcome to, wherever they are, in a movement or out. Our stress is going to be on these 2 points, that the only demonstration necessary is a demonstration of the realization of God and the development of this spiritual consciousness, which of its own accord externalizes itself, manifests itself, expresses itself in harmony of mind, being, body. This isn't always clearly understood. And because it is not clearly understood, there is sometimes the sense of a need to carry this message out to the world. And of course, there again, I'm in disagreement. I feel that those who are ready for such a message will, in their own way, hear of it, learn of it, find it, and come and seek it. And then those that have it should be very generous in their sharing of it. But much in the same sense as the master refusing to heal the woman's child because he was sent only to those of his own household, then on the much imploring on the part of the mother, granting the healing. By this much imploring, the mother showed that she was of his own household, even though not of his race or blood. Those of our household are not of any particular race or blood, or any affiliation or non-affiliation. Those of our household are those who in some way are prepared, have been prepared, for the message that brings the responsibility for life back to themselves. Now, I'm sure that you have all seen, more especially in this last generation, that what we call freedom, liberty, has a high price on it, and a grave responsibility. It is a very easy thing to live under dictatorship. Many people think it's difficult, but it isn't. It's very easy. Because you have nothing to think about it. All your thinking is done for you. You get everything ladled out to you. If you get a little less food than you'd like, you'd be surprised how quickly the stomach gets used to a little less food. And if you have a few less liberties, you'd be surprised how quickly one gets used to less liberties. We over here witnessed that in this generation when for probably 15 years or more, we had so little freedom of the press that an editor was almost afraid to print his paper until he got somebody in Washington to read it to see if he was going to offend anybody. We've had editors all over the country say, oh, no, I can't print that, you know. Our supply of paper would be withdrawn from us. And another one, oh, no, the income tax people would be down on our shoulders and shutting us up if we printed that. No, we have seen how easy it is to get used to having some of our freedoms taken away from us. And after you have 1 and 2 and 3, it's easier even to get used to being without 4, 5, and 6. And so life under a dictator becomes a very simple thing. Eating, drinking, sleeping, and getting a few free games. Hitler used to give them boat rides. People thought they were having a wonderful time. But to be really free, as we have been taught in this country, as we have lived for most of our lives in this country, to be really free is a grave responsibility. A grave responsibility, because we have to think for ourselves, plan for ourselves, and be willing to suffer for our own mistakes. Well, so it is when it comes to a spiritual truth. Once you reveal that the harmony of your life is not dependent on a membership or on being a part of a unit in a group, but that the harmony of your experience is dependent upon your development of your consciousness, you'll find that's a high price to pay. And you'll find also that while many are called, few are chosen. You'll find that few there be enter. The way is so straight and narrow if you really want the way of freedom. If you really seek the way of freedom in Christ. Because it entails this responsibility. Individual effort. You see, sitting in a room listening to sermons can be helpful to a certain point. Even the reading of the right books can be helpful up to a certain point. Even instruction from teachers, good teachers, can be helpful up to a certain point. But take my word for it, a very, very limited amount of help can come from those sources. The help has to come from an activity of truth taking place in the consciousness of an individual. And they have to be the ones to learn to pray without ceasing. You cannot get it in vicariously. You cannot get it in with blood transfusions. You cannot get it in by sitting and listening to someone else talk about it. It is an individual experience, and that's why there are few that are able to enter in. You know, every one of us is faced every single day with temptation. And the temptation is some form of sickness, some form of unhappiness, some form of family discord, some form of economic lack, limitation, distress. And as we so well know now, something has to be done about it if it is to be corrected or overcome. Something has to be done about it. In our earliest stages, we could turn to a Jesus and say, I'm hungry, and have him multiply some loaves and fishes for us. But you'll notice that in his 3-year ministry, he only did it 2 or 3 times. He did not set up food kitchens for those people. He merely did it 2 or 3 times to show them what the principle was. He healed multitudes and then rebuked them because they didn't learn the principle for themselves. If I go not away, the Comforter will not come to you. I can't stay here and be your healer forever. And so we find, too, that in the early days of our experience, we can turn to practitioners and teachers and receive wonderful help. But everybody who is in this work long knows that you can't keep it up forever. If you could, what a nice, easy life for money people. Just hire a practitioner by the month or by the year or by the 5-year plan. And let the practitioner do the work for them while they go out. And it isn't in the cards to happen that way. No one can. It eventually becomes an activity of our individual consciousness. Then we learn not only to help ourselves, but to help others. They, in turn, have to learn to help themselves and help others. And so, just as the price of freedom, the price of liberty, is eternal awareness, vigilance, before someone comes along and snaps it away from us, so the price of spiritual harmony is spiritual alertness. I've seen for too many years groups of people sitting back in a church looking at a sign on the wall that divine love always has met and always will meet every human need, and watch them there for years and years and years not having their human needs met. All the time they were sitting there reading that sign. Yes, you can read that sign and you can do the lesson too, and still not have your needs met unless truth becomes active in consciousness. Then it becomes clear why the basis of all spiritual metaphysics is the unreality of sin, disease, and death. They're any of the spiritual movements, the Christian Science, the Unity, the Divine Science, all of those will agree that the nature of sin, disease, death is an unreality, not a part of God's creation, not a permanent thing, not anything that has externalized existence, but, and each one may express it differently, a state of illusion, a state of maya, or an unreality, or a belief, or an appearance, or a claim. But regardless of the language you use, the meaning is that the specific erroneous condition isn't real. Now then, it is real to the human sense. It is a very real thing in our experience until, in some way, we arrive at a point where the reality of God is so apparent that that which has appeared to us as evil disappears. But you see, that is an activity of truth in our consciousness. In the beginning of our work, this activity of truth is one that must be consciously performed. In other words, let us say that I am faced with some form of limitation. And it is at this minute that that form of limitation is being made apparent to me. It is absolutely necessary that I consciously realize that since God is the source of all, and God is infinite, that all supply must be infinite, whatever its name or nature. And therefore, there can be no reality to this sense of limitation or lack. Now, that's something conscious that goes on. That's a conscious statement of truth. But 3 hours from now, 4 hours from now, that begins to remind me again of its presence, that sense of limitation. And again I must come back with some conscious activity of truth, probably a realization that, wait a minute, since the grace of God is my sufficiency, and the grace of God is as omnipresent as God itself, I stand in that. Ah, yes, but I have done that consciously. That has been a conscious activity of truth in my conscience. But 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours later, it comes up to hound me again. And so on. And it may last a day, a week, a month, or a year. But as long as it lasts, I must consciously bring truth to bear within my own being as an answer to this seeming problem. Now, some form of bodily ill comes. And again, there has to be the conscious realization. It isn't enough just to sit and read a book. There must be a conscious realization in my mind with which to meet that appearance of error, that claim of error. And that goes on until that particular claim is met. Now, the miracle is this, that if we are faithful in that type of work, that is, meeting consciously these claims of discord with whatever truth we know, the miracle that takes place is that we less and less engage in such activity because something else happens. Truth itself begins to flow within us. And instead of our declaring truth, all of a sudden we begin to hear truth. We begin to become aware of truth. We begin to sense truth. It comes to us. We don't have to struggle up here with the mind. Now, in proportion as that comes, that constitutes the development in us of the mind that was in Christ Jesus, the spiritual mind, the mind to which error is not a reality. And as time goes on, we are enabled to drop all that which we have called treatment or argument or the use of the letter of truth. We're able to drop that because the spirit of truth is now beginning to reveal itself. We have developed, through this first practice of the conscious knowledge of truth, we have developed this inner sense of truth that speaks to us. We don't speak to it. It speaks to us. And when it does, because it is the word of truth, the word of God, it's quick and sharp and powerful. And we have our instantaneous healings, or very quick healings, as against the long drawn-out ones that we usually have when we're using only mental argument, when we're using only the letter of truth. Once that spirit of truth comes, our harmonies unfold without effort, without taking thought, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit. And there again you can see that whether you call the error a claim or an appearance or a suggestion or an illusion or whatever language your particular teaching uses, it really makes no difference. No difference. It doesn't make any difference which movement you're in or not in, because the point that you have learned is that regardless of what it is that's appearing, it doesn't exist as that which has a law to sustain it. Now, something comes to my mind right there. Out in Hawaii, there were 3 doctors working on cancer research. And they became infested with something. I don't know whether it was the cancer or the remedy that they were working with, but they were infected and became ill. And after examination were told that there was no hope that any of them could live a whole year. That whatever it was they were infected with, that they were experimenting with, there was no cure for it, at least none that they knew. And that their lifespan would be less than a year. And it so happens that 2 of them, within 8 months, had passed on. And the following month, the 3rd one was in bed, just about ready to pass on, when one of our students, working with some friend of this doctor, was brought to the doctor and told him that he did not have to die, that he could live. And the doctor tried his best to explain to her how impossible it was, because he knew what this thing was and so forth, and he knew how many days he had left. No, she assured him that there was a way for him to be healed if he wanted to be. Oh, yes, he wanted to be. Well, she said, I can give you some help. I don't know whether I can bring about the healing, but I know that I can give you some help that at least will get you out of bed and get you over to see Mr. Goldsmith, and I'm sure that he can do more for you than let you lie there and die. The next day he was out of bed. As far as I'm concerned, I really believe the girl healed him, because he was out of bed, and the day after that, he flew over from the island he was on to Honolulu, where I was, and he called up on the phone and said just about enough for me to not know this whole story, but catch something of it. Well, I know if he could see me, and I was very busy, and said, no, I'm sorry. Good. But I have flown over here. I'm sorry. I can't see you. I'm tied up so that I can't. But if it's a matter of healing, you certainly don't have to see me. There's anything about my body that's going to heal you. And I'll be glad to give you help, and you can call me back tomorrow. So, then he had to explain to me about this cancer research. So I said, look, can I ask you a question? Yes. How are you doing with your research? Well, it's not very well. We're not making any progress on it. None. I said, well, that's natural, isn't it? Is it natural? No. We expect to make progress sometime. No, you're not going to. You can't. Why? Well, what is your basis? What are you trying to discover? That is the law of disease? Well, yes, if we could find out what the law of disease is, we could overcome it. I said, have you ever heard of a law being overcome? Have you ever heard of a law being broken, like 2 times 2 is 4, light begetting light, day following night, roses coming from rose seeds and peaches from peach seeds? Have you ever heard any of those laws being broken? No. Well, you're never going to hear of a law being broken. So if there's a law of disease, my friend, make up your mind, it's going to be an eternal disease. And not only that, but everybody's going to have it, too. So it's going to be infinite and omnipresent. Oh, he said, I've never heard of anything like that. Maybe not. I haven't either until this minute. But what you said brought it forth. Now, I'm sure you're going to find that there never has been such a thing as a law of disease. Because if there's a law of disease, there's going to be, as long as the book stands. You're not going to break it. And I want you to know something, that he's one of our practitioners now, this doctor. And the whole basis of that man's work is that there is no law of disease. Now, what difference does it make whether we call it no law of disease, or whether we call it a claim, or whether we call it an appearance? As long as we recognize that whatever it is that's facing us has no law to support it, maintain it, or to... And how can it have? If the basis of truth is that God is one, there can only be one law. That law would have to be a spiritual law. It couldn't be a law of disease. But don't you see how this is a truth active in our consciousness, with which we are meeting the claim or belief that there is a law of disease. Now, As we work on that line, let's call that the letter of truth. Let's say that's merely a statement of truth, a letter of truth, a mental argument that there is no law of disease. But as that becomes embedded in us, embodied in us, the day comes when we realize, well, that's true, there is no law of disease. Then never again do we state that there is no law of disease. When we're confronted with a condition, we smile at it. Where do you come from? You don't even have to say there is no law. It's just, there it is. Now, again, nobody can accept this truth except the Father has already planted this truth within them. You could not go out on that street and give this truth to the neighborhood. You couldn't go into a church and give it to anyone. You couldn't go anywhere and give it to anyone. Someone has to come to you. Then you can give it to them, because the Father has drawn them. In other words, the Father draws only those to any level of truth for which they are prepared. That's why many people come to this work from faith healing, mental healing, and then finally spiritual healing. They've been led step by step through whatever they could accept. The sad thing is that very often people come who are not ready for this particular type and fail to find that for which they're seeking. And they go away. The reason they come is not because they've been drawn to it, but because they've heard that so-and-so is a good healer and they're going to go and get a healing. And of course, see, they can't get a healing. Not in this world. The only thing you can get in this world is the realization of God. And if you're not ready for realization of God, you're not going to have the things that automatically follow. Now, there are people who are on a mental plane, and they can go to some mental science, mental truth, and make a lot of affirmations to themselves and self-hypnosis, auto-suggestion, until, like going to Lourdes in Europe, you can just raise yourself through blind faith and ecstasy to a place where you can make a demonstration now and then. But it's not a principle, and you can't count on it. You never know when it's going to let you down. But those people that can temporarily be benefited on that could not very often be benefited on ours. Because what comes up is this. You sit there, I sit there, and tell them these wonderful things about God, and the first thing you know, yes, but my rent is due Saturday. And you see, you've lost them, and they've lost you. Because you are not trying to meet their rent Saturday, you are trying to reveal to them the omnipresence of God. And if they once realize that, their rent will be met Saturday. Not because you met it for them, but because God was revealed to them. But if they cannot forget their rent long enough to seek the realization of God, they are not going to make their demonstration on this level. And those are the ones who very often say, well, I can't see anything in this, it didn't meet my need, and off they go seeking something else. That is why it is more necessary for us to stay where we are, within our shell, live whatever we understand of this truth, and by that living, attract to ourselves those ready for unfoldment at that level. And then when they come, share with them. Share liberally. The more you have. But to give your pearls to those who are not prepared for it, to give your pearls is, it's a sad experience. It's a sad experience that has happened to everybody in this work who, in their enthusiasm, in their desire to share and to give this, have just poured out the greatest spiritual things in the world at the feet of those who were only ready for having their rent met on Saturday or getting rid of the pain. Now, there too is a reason that no organization can ever be with the infinite way. For a simple reason that a man came to me a few years ago in Los Angeles, and said, I would like to offer you $40,000 for your month of November. Oh, beautiful. If I don't have to kill too many people for $40,000. Oh, no, nothing like that. Well, what could I possibly do that would be worth $40,000 in November? Well, the first week, you could go on the radio every morning for 15 minutes. And then the second week, you could give free lectures at the embassy. And the third week, you could give a beginner's class, and the fourth week, an advanced class. And I'd give you $40,000 for that. Well, for heaven's sakes, what would I have to say on that radio? I understand that must be the come on, but what do I have to say for that place? Nothing, just tell them that you can give them help and supply. Oh, that's all. That's all I must say is I can give you help and supply. I wish I could. If I could only go on the radio and tell people that I could give them help and supply, I think I'd be a very, very happy man. But I'll tell you the truth, I can't. Why, he says, your books are full of it. I know you didn't read them correctly. My books say that I can give you a God experience. I can reveal God. I can show you God. Oh, he said, they wouldn't be interested in that. No, I didn't think they would. Not $40,000 worth. Ah, yes, if you can go on the air and promise supply and help, fine, try it. See what chance you have to get this across to those who are sitting there with no thought of God, no thought of the Christ, no thought of giving up the self, no thought of self-surrender, just the thought of getting supply and help. And you'll see that the message wouldn't penetrate one single bit. I was shocked last month in November in New York to go into the New York Public Library and look for my books and not find them there. And spoke to one of my friends about it, and they said, oh, I know one of the librarians. I'll go and find out what's wrong. He went down, and the librarian said, oh, we don't have any religious books here. We gave all our religious books to the seminary. So you see, people in New York aren't interested in religion, because we have one shelf for Christian Science books because the scientists demand it. And they come for those books all the time. But they're the only religious books we have in the New York Public Library. Yes, you see, of course it isn't quite true. Those who are interested in religion in New York don't have to go to the public library for their books. They can find them elsewhere. But the public as a whole in New York, probably there's something to it. He said they just didn't use those books. They lay on the shelf years and years and years. Nobody read them. Why? Probably New York as a whole isn't looking for God. But you'll find, the longer you're in this work, that even those who come to metaphysics, the majority of them, when they first come, aren't thinking about God. They are thinking about some demonstration of something or condition or person. And when you first broach them the idea that I'm not much interested in whether you get that or not, I'm interested in whether you find God, you'd be surprised at some of the shocked looks you get. Oh, I thought you were a practitioner. I thought that's what you were here for, was to... No, I'm only here for one thing, to help you find God. And I've seen them get right up and walk out. Now, when you find those who are led to you, those who find you, and you begin to reveal something of this, you find quite a different thing. You find it very easy to work with those students, and you find them make wonderful, wonderful progress. The moment their mind is off of conditions separate and apart from God, and on the fact of the realization of God, their problems begin to fade. And they make beautiful, beautiful students. Well, now, does that bring up questions? If it does, let us have a little period of questions. If I can answer them, I will. If I can't, I'll tell you.